All right, how's it going, everyone? Gamma Fighter here, coming at you with another Sylvaneth video. This time we're going to be going over the manifestations that we can bring. We'll talk about the different uses that they have, how they interact with our army, and that way you can make the best decision about which manifestation lore you can bring. So one of the good things about Sylvaneth is that we have a lot of really good wizards, so you kind of have to try to not bring any wizards, and that means that we can make the full use of the manifestations. And it seems like manifestations are really, really strong. So you can keep summoning them. It's not like if the manifestation dies, then you're not allowed to summon it anymore. You can just keep bringing them back. So it can take something like a 120 point branch witch, and she can literally summon like 1,000 points worth of stuff throughout the course of the game. Yeah, maybe not 1,000, but pretty close to it, if not exactly 1,000. And so that means that we can make really good use of the manifestations, and manifestations are really strong. So while I've been pretty down overall on the faction and just how much it's changed and how many hoops we have to jump through to just kind of get to baseline with other armies, this is one thing where I think we can leverage that strength. So I think this is going to be a good video for me to learn from too. So hopefully you guys learn as well. Um, One thing off the bat, I'm not going to be going over the Sylvaneth manifestation lore because I did that in the faction pack review. Long story short is that I just don't think that the manifestation lore for Sylvaneth is very good, and it's pretty much never the right choice. There's always exceptions, but for the most part, I don't think I would ever plan on bringing it. The other thing is I'm not going to be reading word for word on the manifestation war scrolls here. I'm going to either assume that you're following along on a PDF that you can download yourself from Warhammer Community, or you can pause the screen and read it, or you're already familiar with it. So I will highlight the things that are more important. I'll talk about the stats and stuff every single time, but for the most part, I'm not going to be reading word for word everything. So with that, let's go into it. So the first one is the Cron Spine, and manifestation is all on its own. So if you bring it, this is the only one that you can bring. It also has the highest casting value of 8, so it's pretty difficult to cast, and but it's also really, really powerful as a trade-off for all of that. So we got 12 health on a 4-up save, so that's pretty beefy. It's every manifestation has a 6-up ward. So if I forget to say that, you don't need to correct me. Just assume that every one of them has a 6-up ward. So that's a pretty beefy manifestation here. And yeah, you like to see it. For the attacks, it doesn't have a huge volume, and it hits on a 4. So on average, you're only going to be having 3 hits, and then you're on a 2-up to wound. So most of the time, your wounds are going to go through as well. And then it's Rend 2 damage 3. So we start with not a huge volume, but this ends up where it can be quite a bit of damage. Rend 2 means that a lot of the time it's going through no matter what. Maybe your opponent's saving on 6s. So it's very strong. And then it's anti-manifestation. And that isn't just for that attack. I mean, this whole thing is designed around hunting down manifestations. So if it eats a manifestation, or if it destroys a manifestation, I say eats it because it heals at the end of the turn. And then it can charge 3d6 as long as it ends that charge near a manifestation. So um, this thing is meant to really hunt down enemy manifestations. And then when it's banished, it takes 6 damage instead of actually being banished. So it's pretty tough to get rid of. They're going to either have to take 2 turns and hope it doesn't heal, or they're going to have to put some damage, some real damage into it. So, and like I said before, I'm not going to keep bringing this up, but if this dies, you can just summon it again. You can even summon it on your opponent's turn with magical intervention. Now you have to hit a 9 on the casting roll, but still, it's just such a big payoff that it's probably worth it just to try. I mean, unless you really have a plan where you need to conserve your command points, for the most part, and again, I'm not going to keep saying this every time, but a lot of times it's probably worth it just to try getting these manifestations off in your opponent's turn. Like it's just really strong. You're basically summoning units. Um, Sometimes, pretty underpowered units and stuff like that. But still, like if you can get the crown spine off by a miracle, then I mean, if you try every time or every round, or every battle round, if you make an attempt during your opponent's turn, like it's going to go off at least once in the game. So, and it can really turn the tide. So, anyways, all that to say, this is a really strong manifestation. Now, if you bring it, then you can only summon this one, though. And so I think, in my mind, that tells me that it's probably better if you have like one caster and you can either give them Spellsinger or it's something like Alariel, where they can get a bonus to cast, just to make it more reliable. And then just every turn you can like just try and summon it. If you have a bunch of wizards, then they would all have the opportunity to summon a manifestation. But if you only have one wizard, they can still summon multiple manifestations, but you may as well just make it one really powerful manifestation. And then the other time that would be good to bring it is if manifestations really do take over please do not take a shot for every time I say manifestation because I'm going to be saying it so much. I'm already sick of it in this video. I'm so sick of it already, and I've just started. Um, but sorry, I have to keep saying it. But anyways, if manifestations really dominate the meta, then this could be a counter pick. It can only do so much on its own, but if if everyone else has just regular like the smaller and weaker manifestations, this might just gobble them up and kind of negate that power for your opponent. So worth considering in that sense too. All right, next is the Forbidden Power pack. So there's going to be 4 manifestations in this lore. So we'll start with the shards here. They're 8 health on a 4-up save with that 6-up ward. So it's all right. That's pretty good for a manifestation. Again, I'm not going to keep saying for a manifestation. So whereas like compared to a unit that only had 8 health, that would be pretty bad. But for manifestations, of course, this is pretty good. You get 2 pieces as well, and if one of them is destroyed, then they both get destroyed. And this is a weird kind of a tech piece where it makes it so your opponent cannot fly near them. My understanding of the wording on this is that if your opponent is flying and they start their move outside of 6, but then they move to being within 6, they lose the fly ability when they get within 6. You could also interpret it as saying when they start their move when they're within 6, then they can't fly, but if they start their move outside of 6, they can. But I think it's the first way that I said. So and then you can relocate these things with a little bit of a teleport type of thing as long as they stay within 9 inches of each other. This is kind of a weird tech move. They kind of have big bases, so it does put out this pretty big projection of an area where your opponent can't fly. I can't really think of a use where this would be like a silver bullet against any particular army. It can be kind of annoying, but I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think it's just kind of a cute trick. With the bases being so big, it just does kind of block areas, and you could use it as a screen that also prevents flying. And I'm wondering if that's really what they were intended, that this is kind of a throwaway thing. You can just use it. You get 2 screens out of it, and your opponent can't even fly over them. Um, which, it's kind of niche, but kind of a possibly a useful use case. We don't really have a ton of points where we can be spending on a lot of screens. And even so, our best screen is the Dryads, and they really want to be wholly within 6 inches of an Awakened Wildwood, which really limits their ability. So this could give us some more of that. All right, next is the Horrorghast. So there are only 2 manifestations that can shoot, and this is one of them. It's 6 health on a 6-up save, which is awful. This is really bad. So this is one of the worst defensive profiles. And so it's got a shooting attack. It's only 6 attacks, hits on 2, wounds on 3. So it's fairly accurate. Yeah, that's pretty accurate. And then it's got Rend 2, which is, once again, it means pretty much as long as you wound, it's going to go through the armor save. But it's just 1 damage. So max damage of 6. You're going to be dropping a couple to the hit and wound roll. So we're looking at, like 3 or 4 damage. I'm not really in love with it. You don't want this in combat. It can shoot in combat, but it's just not meant to be in combat. It's so squishy, and its combat attacks don't do anything. And then it's anti-infantry rend 1, but the rend is already so high, so the you'd really prefer actually if you could get more damage somehow out of this thing rather than more rend. So the ability is that it can shut off command abilities for the unit that it shoots, and even if your other like allied units shoot that enemy unit, then it increases the chances of shutting off the command abilities. Um, I think probably the best use of this is actually to shut off the enemy ability to use that covering fire ability. That's probably the best use because if you destroy too many models in like a combat unit and then you charge into them and like you're likely to destroy them. Even if you wipe out quite a few of them and then you charge in, um, they're already damaged. So you may actually choose to, if you have multiple activations for combat, you may choose to have one of your other combat units activate first and then have this unit activate second because they're going up against a damaged unit already, and then still have a pretty good chance of wiping out the enemy unit. So as far as like um it's sort of anti-synergy. It's a non-bow because you're already damaging the enemy unit and then you're shutting off their abilities, but they're already weakened. You'd rather shut off abilities for units that are stronger. So that's why I think probably best use against ranged units, you can shut off their ability to use covering fire, which could be pretty strong. One thing to note is you have to set this up outside of 9 inches from the enemy, so it's got a shooting range of 10, which means you can't set it up way back and just snipe units with this. You have to set it up as close as possible, and then they're easily in charge range to just wipe this thing out easily. Just kind of an annoyance thing. So it's not great damage. Um, Kind of a niche ability to shut off covering fire is probably the best use for it. So I'm not really in love with this manifestation. All right, next is the Soul Scream Bridge, and this this works pretty similarly to third edition. Basically, it's just more teleport shenanigans. Um, my understanding is you have to set this up, and I hate that they don't put the spell casting rule on the page here with the War Scroll because I'd have to go back to reference it. But my recollection is that this is an you have to set both of the pieces up wholly within 18 inches of the caster, and then they both have to be within like 6 or 9 inches of each other. Um, let's see. Oh yeah, wholly within 5 inches. So, oh wait, that's for the teleport rule. Never mind. So yeah, they have to be like pretty close to each other. It's pretty limiting. We already have teleports available to us. I think it would probably mostly be better to summon an Awakened Wildwood, although you can banish these and you can't banish the Awakened Wildwoods. Um, so if we were going to use this, it would just be another teleport shenanigan trick. I think this is probably better in any other army. Our army might be one of the worst for this. So yeah, I'm not crazy about this one. And then we have oh, it is super beefy too. It's got a big base. So once again, like you could really just go all in on using this manifestation lore as screens and just summon these big old bases all over the battlefield to just gum up the enemy and maybe go with like a shooting based army, but I don't know how good that is. Um, but yeah, a lot of health. Both halves of the manifestation have that health, and then if one of them is destroyed, they both get destroyed as well. So then we have Laocoon, the Soul Seeker. So again, working very similar to third edition, he can teleport, or he can basically give his 12-inch flying move to an infantry wizard hero. Um, our we don't really have a use to bring our infantry wizards anywhere. It's just branch witch. Yeah. There's some legend stuff. I think the Ilthari's Guardians might be a wizard, but I just really don't pay attention to that stuff. It's going away. And then the other thing might be Arch Revenant, probably qualifies if you give it Spell Singer and it's near an Awakened Wildwood, then it will be a wizard at the start of the movement, and then you use the ability, and then if it ends the movement not next to an Awakened Wildwood, the Arch Revenant won't be a wizard anymore, but I believe that it can still do the movement. So long story short though, oh, and then it does essentially no damage. This is like the wizard combat profile. So it's just there for fun and probably just a joke. But yeah, so not very good use for this either because we don't really need to be moving um our wizards like that, our infantry wizards. Also, the Arch Revenant has a 12-inch flying move on its own, so it doesn't need the help. So yeah, overall, I don't love Forbidden Power for Sylvaneth. It's like movement shenanigans, and we have that as our battle trait, so it's a little redundant. Um, you know, really the trick of like using a bunch of the, just summoning all these as different screens is probably the best use for it, and I don't think that's a very good use, so I don't really recommend it. All right, next is Morbid Conjuration. Starting off with the Soul Snare Shackles. 6 health on a 5-up save is pretty bad. It's not the worst, but it's pretty bad. And this is a cool little thing. There's 3 pieces, and when they are near an enemy, within 3 inches of an enemy, then you do the thing where you roll a d3, and on a 2-up, they take that much damage. This is a non-moving manifestation, so you should be able to set this up within the combat range of the enemy. So you don't have to be like outside a 9 or anything like that. And then the Soul Snare Shackles, when they do damage, they also reduce the enemy movement characteristic by that much for the rest of the turn. And then the other cool thing is because there's 3 pieces, then each one can deal their damage to an enemy unit, but they just have to each target a different enemy unit. But that can end up being quite a lot of chip damage that you're able to do, and also reducing the enemy movement. And for the most, my understanding, yeah, if I think it through right, then the movement reduction really only affects them on your opponent's turn, because it doesn't affect charging, it doesn't affect redeploy because that's not based on their move characteristic anyways. So yeah, it really only affects during the opponent's turn, but that can be a pretty big deal, especially if the army is really slow. Like if you imagine getting hit for 3 on our like Kurnoths and on our like Tree Lords and stuff like that, that can really really hurt our ability to move. So this can be really good, especially on those. The Malevolent Maelstrom is 6 health on a 6-up save, once again. 6-up ward, of course. It's a really interesting attacks because it's 2d6, so it's going to be swingy, but it hits on a 2 and then it's crit 2 hits. So basically, you're going to get, on average, all of your attacks are going to be hits. However many attacks you rolled, on average, you're going to have that many hits because crit 2 hits is the same as +1 to hit. So effectively, statistically, you're rolling on a 1-up, which is interesting. And then wounding on a 3-up, so like really accurate damage. It's just no rend and 1 damage. Really swingy the number of attacks that you're going to have. So I'm not super in love with the attack profile, but it's not really meant to be an attacking profile. It's meant to work as a bit of a hand grenade. So every time that you cast a spell, or a spell that's cast within 12 inches of it, or a model is slain and removed within 12 inches of it, then it gains a point. And then when it gets to 6 points, you have the option to destroy it at the end of your turn, and it'll do d6 damage effectively. Roll a dice on a 2-up, deal that much damage to the enemy or to the target. And it's for everything that's within 9 inches of it. Some of these other manifestations will have a limit of like hitting 3 enemy units, but this can hit all units, including your own, and it's within 9 inches. The wording on it says that seems to indicate that you have the option to do this. You don't have to do it, but if you have a lot of casts, you could summon this first and then cast all your spells, and it might already be at the max. Remove a couple of models and send it forward, and well, I guess you don't send it forward. You summon it, and then it can't move that turn. So if you summon it in the right place, then it could be within 9 inches of an enemy, as long as they don't make their countercharge and destroy it, then it can blow up for all that damage. And if you hit like if you hit one target with this, it's pretty good. Like it's not that bad. But if you hit like 2, 3 plus units, like this is really this can really do a number on them. Uh, a lot of stuff is like D3 mortal damage now, so getting D6 mortal damage is pretty good. So I really do like the Malevolent Maelstrom here. And I said I wasn't going to keep talking about it, but you can summon this every single turn, including on your opponent's turn. So that's pretty wild, dude. All right, next is the Suffocating Gravetide. 8 health on a 6-up save. That 6-up is yikes. 6-up ward, of course. And it's got an interesting damage profile. It's got 8 attacks, which is pretty good for what we've seen so far. Hitting on 2, wounding on 3, quite accurate. Seeing that pretty much in common with a lot of the manifestation combat profiles. They're pretty accurate overall. And then it's rend 1, damage 1, but if you charge with it, it's damage 2. So if you make that 9-inch charge when you first summon it, it can be doing some pretty good damage. Otherwise, it's kind of working as a screen, and your opponent will probably charge into it and destroy it. But even if they do, it was free, so who really cares? This also has a really big base, so it does work very well as a screen. It also has that, retained a similar ability from 3rd edition. It's able to move over enemy units, and then you roll a dice for each model in that unit, and every 5-up deals 1 mortal damage. So this is really good as a chaff killer. It's got a pretty decent combat profile. It's not super durable. It will die really, really easily. So it's it's got that weakness. It's not like a combat monster like the Kronspine or anything like that, but it's pretty solid for a manifestation. Um, the thing with the movement is that it can't end its movement within 3 inches of the enemy. So even though it's a manifestation, it's not exempt from that rule. So you have to fly your Gravetide over the enemy unit, like just toe over it, and then back 3 inches, or else you can't do that movement. Now, it shouldn't be too bad because it does have a 12-inch flying move, so it is quite mobile. So there, but yeah, it's not gonna. It kind of makes it 3 inches harder to do that move than it sounds like it is. So something to keep in mind with that. Next is the Purple Sun, and this is the last one for the Morbid Conjuration. And this one also is cast on an 8 like the Kronspine. Obviously, I'm not going over every casting value, but that's 8's just like really high. So this has 10 health on a 5-up save with a 6-up ward. It's pretty beefy for manifestation, of course. The combat profile is 2d6 attacks, and pretty accurate. Rend 1, damage 1 with crit mortals. So you're going to have pretty consistent damage getting through. I say consistent. It's pretty swingy because the number of attacks is going to vary so wildly. But hitting on 3s and wounding on 3s is fairly accurate. And then crit mortals makes it even more damage. It's nothing like the Rend 2 damage 3 or anything like that, but it's going to be pretty consistent damage. It also has a move over the enemy ability. It's not quite as strong, but not as strong as the Gravetide, but still like pretty good chip damage, bonus damage. It also only has an 8-inch move, so it's going to be quite a bit harder. Although it can hit up to 3 enemy units, but I'd really think that's going to be very rare considering it's just an 8-inch move, and it can't start the move within 3 inches. I say that, but now I wonder if that's true. I think he would still, yeah, it counts as a unit during the movement phase, I believe. So it can't be in combat range already, and then it has to do its movement, and then it has to end outside of combat range too. So effectively, it's a 2-inch movement, if my understanding of how it works is correct. So so you have to be like within 5 inches of the enemy already, which is pretty close. Anyways, the other benefit is it does reduce the enemy save by 1. So this can be really valuable in just as a supporting piece. Like you don't have to have it attack first. You might even have your other unit be in combat alongside the purple sun and just get the benefit of that -1 to save and effectively give your unit of bug riders or something a +1 to rend, effectively. And then the bug riders might just destroy the enemy unit, and then the purple sun can't do anything, but it kind of did its job anyway, so that's good. And then there's the other really useful ability or useful thing about -1 to save is that this isn't just in the combat phase, so it works for shooting as well. So this can be a really big buff to your Kurnoth hunters and just make them really a lot more consistent. And even, chipping away with some Gossamids too. And this also has the ability where if it gets banished, it takes 6 damage instead of just automatically being banished. So the Purple Sun is also a really strong contender. Overall, the Morbid Conjuration to me seems really strong. It does seem very popular in the meta right now as well because the three later War Scrolls that we went over are really strong. And even the Soul Snare Shackles could be considered the weakest one, but it manipulates your opponent's movement in a tactical game, which means that it really can't be underestimated. You really shouldn't underestimate it. And if you're able to set it up so that it can hit 3 targets, like it's actually doing quite a bit of damage too. So it's not super sexy, but it still is a very strong War Scroll for manifestation. So Morbid Conjuration, this is really good if you have a bunch of different wizards. You can make a lot of summoning attempts per turn, and you can make 4. You can't, if you fail to summon the Purple Sun with one wizard, you can't try to summon it with another wizard or even with the same wizard. So if you can make 4 attempts, then that's great. So the Morbid Conjuration is like 4 really strong War Scrolls that you could be bringing out every single turn, which is really ridiculous. Okay, so next is the Atherrot machinations or Atherrot machineries, something like that. Starting with the chronomatic cogs, 6 health on a 4-up save. 4-up's really good. 6-up ward, of course. And this can either give your allied units reroll to charge when they're within 12 inches, or it can give your wizards that are wholly within 12 -1 to be hit. So your opponents have -1 to hit them. So one cool trick with the -1 to hit is that Alarielle is a wizard. So, and it doesn't say it has to be an infantry wizard. So this works on her as written, which is great. So it could be pretty cool to just drop this as like a buff piece for her, using her as an anvil. But of course, for your other wizards as well, sort of like just a desperation button to try and keep them alive. So that's pretty cool. And then reroll the charge. I've talked about that. We don't have really good buffs to charge. We just have the Spite Swarm Hive that gives +1 to charge, which is really lame. And if you're bringing the Spite Swarm Hive, you can't bring this, obviously. But this is another option. Instead of, this doesn't directly benefit your charge as in increasing the number, but re-rolling is more consistent, obviously, because if you fail, you get another shot at it. So this could be something if you want to try doing the teleport shenanigans and making those 9-inch charges. This is a way to do it. The other thing is, I don't know if there is a rule about like saying that you're only allowed to reroll a charge 1 time, but my understanding of the rules currently is that this gives you the ability to reroll your charges, and then the like forward to victory command ability also allows you to reroll your charges. So if you fail with the chronomatic cogs reroll, my understanding, let me know in the comments if I'm wrong. You can correct me, and I'll put a correction in the comments. But my understanding is you can use both of them. You can then use the command point to reroll your charge as well, which is a lot more consistent. So I still don't think it's worth it to try and go for these 9-inch charges all the time. But that this still, even if you're going for 6-inch, 7-inch charges, there's going to be times where you fail those, and you're going to be happy to reroll without using a command point with this. So next is the Aether Void Pendulum, just 6 health on a 5-up save, and this does that thing just like in third edition, where when you set it up, then you are picking the direction that it's able to move. So it can only move towards the point of the pendulum. And it's interesting, like this is one of the only um, manifestations where like the model actually really matters and they don't show a picture of the model, which is kind of frustrating, but it's got a point on there and you have to point it in the direction you want it to go. And then it can move in that direction. And for up to 3 enemies that it passes over, then you can do d6 damage, although you ignore it if it does 1 damage. If you roll a 1, it doesn't do any damage. The big problem with this is that you can't move it in the turn that you set it up. So this is really hard to aim, and you you have to banish it and then resummon it again to be able to aim it again, to move it. When you move it, you are not allowed to pivot it. Again, this is my understanding of the rules as written. I'm pretty confident about this though. Because the wording is like, yeah. But anyways, I mean, and that's how it worked in third edition too. Again, my understanding. So that's how I played it. So you, in order to change the direction, you have to banish it and then resummon it. But by then your opponent might have moved. So being able to hit up to 3 units for d6 damage is very, very good. Most of the time, you're probably not going to be able to hit 3 anyways. So you're likely probably most often you're going to be hitting 1 enemy unit. But even then, it's very telegraphed. So like maybe if you go second and then you get the double turn, you can set this up. But otherwise your opponent can get around it. Now that in itself, manipulating your opponent's movement by like telling them, hey, you can go here, but you're going to take d6 damage on whatever unit goes here, that has its value. But as far as like this just being a raw damage output, I don't think that's what this is going to do very good. So it's pretty limited. I really like I loved it in third edition, but it's pretty limited the way that manifestations work now. All right, next is the Quicksilver Swords. Oh yeah, so this manifestation lore only has 3 pieces, and this is the third one. So Quicksilver Swords, 6 health on a 5-up save. Not very strong. Got 12 attacks though with 3s and 3s with rend 1, damage 1, and crit mortals. So it's quite a high volume, quite accurate. It's got the crit mortals, so this is going to be pretty consistent damage. It even negates your opponent's ward rolls just for the attacks done by the Quicksilver Swords themselves. So it doesn't shut off their wards completely, but this damage does bypass wards, which is a tech piece. Night Haunt is really strong right now, and part of why is because of all the wards that they have. So this could be a way to get around that. The thing is, this isn't like a ton of damage. Um, it's not terrible, but it's not a ton. Um, so I'm kind of torn on this one. The other thing is it's super weak defensively. So if you choose to activate this one second, your opponent could pretty easily just wipe it out. Now, maybe you've got more activations going on, and so your opponent like destroying the Quicksilver Swords is actually a worthwhile sacrifice for you, in which case that's fine. But um, I find it sort of difficult to see how it's going to be used in a good way, really. So yeah, I'm not super excited about the Quicksilver Swords. I think if you're bringing the Atherrot manifestations, probably the strongest one will be the chronomatic cogs, and you're kind of building a strategy around it, either to get these more consistent charges off or like a -1 to hit on Alariel or Draika or the Lady of Vines or something like that. And then these other two are kind of supporting it. Some area denial and maybe some damage with the pendulum, and then just a bit of chip damage, or maybe just a sacrifice play with the Quicksilver Swords. That's fine. I don't think it's a particularly strong one for us in Sylvaneth, though. All right, next is the Primal Energy. So we're starting off with the Burning Head, 6 health on a 6-up save. This is the other manifestation that has a shooting attack. Pretty good amount. I mean, it's going to be swingy. It's D6. Yeah, sorry, it's not a good amount. It's a good. The rest of the profile is good though. Really accurate, hitting on 2s, wounding on 3s, Ren 2, so you're pretty guaranteed to get the damage through. It's going to be going through a lot. Even better against war machines, though I don't know how prevalent those are. Shooting combat, so whatever. It deals 1 damage to itself, which when it shoots, which tells me that this is really meant to be like super sacrificed because it's very weak defensively. It even damages itself. Like it's sort of like a hand grenade as well. It doesn't explode, obviously, but just like you just throw it in there and it just causes some havoc. Um, if it doesn't do that much damage with the shooting attacks, you're not really that burned up about it, pun intended. And then it's got an okay damage profile. It's for combat, it's the same as the shooting profile, except it's 2d6 attacks instead of 1d6. So this thing is like one that you're really happy to throw in there and allow it to be destroyed. So I look at this. Yeah, it's okay for it to get destroyed, but if it gets any damage off, that's just kind of a bonus. And I kind of compare that with the Quicksilver Swords, and it's kind of the same idea of like, the it's more accurate. It's got a higher rend and stuff. It doesn't have the crit mortal. Yeah, whereas the Quicksilver, you're guaranteed to get 12 every turn, so it's a little bit more reliable and stuff like that. But I think it's like in my mind, they're pretty much on par. I mean, you get the shooting attacks as well with the Burning Head that you don't get with the Quicksilver Swords. Um, so, I'm just comparing them because I was pretty down on the Quicksilver Swords, and I may be sounding a bit higher on the Burning Head, but part of it is it's very disposable. I did forget to mention this casts on a 5. Let me double check that. Yeah, it casts on a 5. So it's like really easy to get off. And so there's essentially no opportunity cost for you to use this Burning Head. And if it dies, you can just summon it again, like really reliably. So um, it is pretty, yeah, it's pretty expendable, but in a good way. All right, next is Ravenak's Gnashing Jaws. The Primal Energy manifestation lore also has 3 pieces to it, so this is the second one of that. This is 10 health on a 5-up save, which is pretty beefy. Um, the interesting thing about the movement is it's 3d6, and I don't really like random movement, but it is what it is. The attack profile is 10 attacks, which is nice. Hitting on 4s, not great, but wounding on 2s, which is good. Rend 1, damage 1, but it gets +1 damage on the charge. So you can be hitting for 2 damage each, which is really nice. And it has impact hits. So when you charge with it, you roll 10 dice, and every 5 up gives you 1 mortal damage to the enemy, which is pretty nice. This is also another one of those manifestations that when it gets banished, it just takes 6 damage instead of actually being banished. So the jaws are like pretty beefy and they have pretty good damage when they charge, and they even do impact hits and stuff like that. So it's not going to be trivial for your opponent to remove it. I mean, a unit that's 10 health on a 5-up save, 6-up ward isn't that great, but for a manifestation that you're just able to summon, I really like that. The jaws are cast on a 7, which is um, a little bit expensive for a manifestation. Most of them cast on a 6. The like pretty good ones cast on a 7, and then the really good ones are the ones that cast on an 8. So the cast on a 7, it's a little bit trickier, a little bit less consistent to get off, but when you do, and if you can get that 9-inch charge when you set it up, then this can be doing like pretty serious damage to your opponent. All right, and then the Emerald Life Swarm, it's just 5 health with a 6-up save. That is absolute garbage. So yeah, that is booty cheeks. But it's not meant for you're meant to keep it back. you use it as heal. It heals itself every turn, which whoop-de-doo. So I guess maybe if it survives some damage from like a wizard or something, some mortal damage, um, it'll heal back up. But like I think any meaningful shooting is going to wipe this thing out. So and of course combat as well. So not that great, but it's 3 healing. Um, so and I'm not even really going to talk about the combat profile. It's pretty bad. Um, it's pretty bad. It's not meant to be in combat, pretty obviously. You're meant to keep it back and use it to heal. So this is an option to heal your Alariel or any other kind of anvil units that you're using. And we do have really good units to use this on because we have so many that are just like a lot of health. And even stuff like our Kurnoth Hunters have 5 health. So so this is a pretty good effect if you're trying to be more defensive and you want to make sure that like your anvil unit can survive. The life swarm can be pretty good. So the primal energy has a pretty good mix where it's got this more expendable kind of chippy damage here from the burning head that's easier to get off. It's got the bigger, more meaningful damage coming from the jaws that's a little bit harder to cast. And then it's got the healing ability. And this seems like a pretty good mix for our armies. It's not maybe not quite as strong just offensively as the Morbid Conjuration, but the jaws do a lot of work. And the Burning Head has its place as well. And then, of course, I think the biggest consideration is like if you really want that healing and you really want to lean into that, or something like keeping Belthanos or keeping Alariel alive is a big part of your game plan. Or if you're going for like the hyper defensive, like Tree Lords with the Lady of Vines giving them a 5-up ward, or the Warsong Revenant giving them a 6-up ward, and then in the Lords of the Clan, so that they can heal for 3 at the end of the turn, as long as they're wholly within 6 inches of an Awakened Wildwood. And then you can heal them more with the Life Swarm on top of that. I could see that being attempted and being useful there. There's some armies where they can just deal so much damage it doesn't matter. They're just going to chew through anything. But there's going to be some armies that are going to struggle into lifting a Tree Lord with that much support. So yeah, definitely has its place. All right, next is the Twilight Sorceries. This is the last one. So for this, we'll start with the Geminids. 8 health on a 6-up save. Okay, 8 health is pretty good. 6-up is not good. And then there's 2 pieces, and if one of them's destroyed, the other one gets destroyed as well. And then they each have this attack profile, so it's a total of 8 attacks if they're both in combat. Hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s, rend 1 is not great. It's okay, pretty accurate, but it's just such low volume. But then you see the damage is D3, which is on average 2 damage, which means that these guys can do quite a bit of damage. Not super reliable, but you're generally not taking the manifestations. Well, okay. There are manifestations you're taking for damage, but I don't think that's really the selling point of the Geminids. It's just that they can kind of do a surprising amount of damage, I'd say, for a tech piece, really. And yeah, so their thing is that they shut off enemy command abilities. So as long as they're in combat with enemy, they can't use command abilities. So this is good for once again, like shutting off something like the covering fire. Now, let's see, that would be, yeah, you'd have to have the enemy tied up in combat anyways, so they wouldn't be able to use covering fire now that I think about it. So it can help shut off stuff like all-out attack. And because they have to be within 9 inches of each other, but they can kind of cover a wide area. So you can tie up a couple of the enemy units and then have your units, your other units, your hammer units in combat with the enemy, and the Geminids are shutting off the enemy command abilities. That's how it was pretty much used in 3rd edition, although they didn't have the combat profile then. So that's a decent use. I it depends on how much people are like using all out defense and saving that command point for that, and how useful it's going to be for you in the particular situation that you're in. I feel like this was stronger in third edition because people were just constantly save stacking and stuff like and using all out defense as part of that, and this was a way to shut that off, which effectively give your guys rend +1. That's not the case here though. So I mean, you can use it that way, but um, I there are so many other valuable things that you can use your command points on that I just don't know how much all-out defense is being used now. Um, I guess now that I think about it, for battle tactics and stuff like that, you pick a unit in the enemy's regiment and you're going to destroy it. Now with the Geminids out there, in combat with that unit, then your opponent can't use all-out defense to try and save them to deny you the battle tactics. So that's pretty good too. Yeah. And there's a lot of battle tactics that involve killing something. Um, so yeah, that can help save you a lot of points. All right, then we have Umbral Spell Portal, and this is 2 pieces as well, 8 health on a 5-up save. We're kind of used to that by now. And your wizards can cast through the spell portal as though the spell portal that's not near them was the source of the casting, so it kind of extends the range a bit. Um, this is how do I say it? Completely useless for us. No, not exactly. So what you could do is so a lot of our spells revolve around the Awakened Wildwoods. I say a lot, but it might be all of them except Alarielle's. Um, the 2d3 mortal wound or mortal damage spell. You can use this to cast trees through to summon Awakened Wildwoods and give kind of increased range to that. That's probably the best use of it. That might actually be good. Um, so that's an option. I don't know how useful it's going to be. Now you're relying on getting 2 spells off just to summon an Awakened Wildwood, but you can summon it further. But then I think at that point, you're kind of limited by where the enemy is. It could be, and how you can't summon within 3 inches of the enemy. So I don't know how useful this is for our army. And then finally, the Prismatic Palisade, 8 health on a 4-up save. So at least it's 4-up. And this can't be shot and it blocks shooting. It blocks basically like line of sight, but just for shooting. And of course, it's a pretty big base, so it does also block, it can screen and that type of thing. Um, that's kind of more of a tech piece for depending on what's good in the meta and stuff like that. I'm trying to think, it doesn't move, so I think as far as like deep strikes and teleports and stuff, it doesn't block the enemy setting up. It just blocks the ranged attacks. So I'm trying to think if there's something in particular for our army that would benefit from this, but I really don't think so. Um, we already have the Awakened Wildwoods that we can hide behind and shoot out from. So it's yeah, I don't see a huge use for this unless every, like the Quadrant Overlords become super meta and everyone's using shooting a lot. But yeah, I'm not in love with the Twilight Sorceries. So that's it for all the manifestations. To kind of summarize, the Crown Spine is a big beat stick that can be used to hunt down other manifestations. The Forbidden Power, it's mostly around shooting, or sorry, movement shenanigans. But there is a niche use where you can summon a lot of different parts to screen out for you. The Morbid Conjuration just has 4 like powerful, aggressive, um, well, 3 powerful aggressive manifestations, and then 1 that can do pretty good damage still, but messes with your enemy's movement shenanigans. Or sorry, it doesn't mess with their movement shenanigans. It just messes with their movement. That in itself is a shenanigan. The Atherrot manifestations, you're really thinking about if you want the reroll charges and the -1 to hit the wizard with the cogs. And then the other two, I don't think they're like strong enough that that's the reason that you would take them. So it's really pretty niche in my opinion. I think the primal energy is a bit of a downgrade in terms of offensive power from Morbid Conjuration, but it's still pretty powerful. The jaws do quite a lot of damage. The burning head is expendable and really easy to summon. And then the reason you'd probably want to take this though is for the healing from the life swarm. And then the Twilight Sorceries, I really don't think is very powerful. The spell portal is not super useful in our armies, and the Palisade's very limited, and in the Geminids um, are just okay. Um, they can help us get some battle tactics if you're having trouble where your opponent, where you declare battle tactic to destroy something and your opponent is able to save them with like all-out defense pretty consistently. Um, I I don't see that happening too much with our armies though. So overall, I think Twilight Sorceries is probably not the best. So I'm going to cut it off here and just end it here. There is more to dive into as far as like comparison, going deeper in the comparison between the different manifestations in terms of their durability, their damage, their casting, and everything like that. I do want to do that in a separate video because this has gone pretty long already. And I think this will give most people the information that they need already to make their decision. Whereas the deeper dive is probably going to be a little bit more niche for people. So if you want to watch that, I'm going to be planning on releasing that later this week. So stay tuned for that. But for now, let me know what your favorite manifestation lore is. Let me know if I got anything really wrong or if I'm overlooking something, some kind of synergy or combo that we can do with some of these, or if I'm just totally off base and maybe something's not as strong as I think it is, or I'm not taking something into account. So that's it for me. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.